Hi there folks, today we're going to be looking at the ARB drawers, and as you notice here inside my Land Cruiser FJ80, it's actually a Lexus 450 but just a glorified Land Cruiser. What I have in the back here is a set of dual ARB drawers along with dual ARB sliders. And one of the things that came up that was a little bit of an issue for me was the locks that actually come with the ARB drawers themselves. The locks are fine, did what they needed to do, but after taking a look at the key that actually comes with it, I figured maybe this isn't the most secure key I could possibly get. And after looking at a couple YouTube videos, and roughly about 6 seconds later, I was able to go ahead and crack into the key itself. And that wasn't exactly the type of security that I was hoping for, so that sent me on to my next challenge. The next challenge was making sure that all of the Wits End products that I have we're all going to be using the same type of locking mechanism used on other things that I have. So if somebody already has the lock box, or if somebody already has the locking lid for the fire extinguisher, they'll be able to use the same Medeco type locks that I have been using. And so if you look over on this side, what I went ahead and did is I actually changed the lock itself so that it actually uses a Medeco type lock along with the Medeco key itself. So let me flip that over so you can see the actual name itself. And there's a little bit of a process that you have to go through, but it's actually not so bad. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you exactly how that's done. Before we get into the disassembly of it, what I wanted to show is exactly what the difference is that we're working with. Here you can see the key that's supplied with the ARB drawers. There's the actual tumbler itself. Here's the key from Medeco, and here's the tumbler from Medeco itself. So the actual tumbler itself that I selected is actually one that is the same exact sizing that I'm looking for. The only difference really is the amount of the height of the bezel itself, and there's a little bit of a difference on how the cam itself attaches, but we'll get into that. It's small tiny differences which at the end of the day really isn't that big of a deal. Alright guys, what you can use is a Phillips or a flathead screwdriver, and all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and unscrew all 4 of these. And by taking off all 4, that actually lets you take off the entire locking mechanism itself, which is what you would need so that you can gain access to the lock and tumbler itself. And I'm going to go ahead and leave the screws and the washers in here because I really don't need those until I'm ready to put this thing back together. Okay, so here we are on just any old table. This is the lock that we just took off. If a lock and handle. If you go and turn this thing around, you can see there's actually the 4 holes that actually uses to secure this onto the drawer itself. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to take off this backing plate. In doing so, there's actually going to be 2 springs that are going to want to pop out, and probably will pop out. Let them pop out, it's not a big deal to go ahead and put them in. But it's necessary to go ahead and take this off because that's really the only way that we're going to gain access to the tumbler and the locking cam itself. Now right here, what I have is the new Medeco tumbler and the actual new cam that's actually going to come with it. So I was really lucky to be able to source a cam of the right length, and also able to source some There's not too many of this exact type of Medeco tumbler, but there's enough for what I need to do. But it has the right length that goes from the bottom of the bezel to where the cam height's going to be, and this Medeco lock actually has a slightly shallower bezel than a lot of the other ones that are out there. And part of that reason is because if you look onto the side of this, you can see where the handle meets the tumbler, or the lock side here, and basically how proud that is from the mechanism itself, and you can see it on this side as well. And so by going with this lock, yeah, we do go a little bit above, but if you have your tailgate itself that comes up onto the edge itself, this doesn't stick out far enough that it winds up impacting the tailgate. So that's why I had to source a Medeco lock that actually had a shortened bezel height. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and take off the back side of the locking handle. Let's just force some little screws. And once I get towards the end, I'm going to want to put pressure on it, because those two springs that I was mentioning before are going to want to pop out. I can already feel the tension on the plate itself. So as I go ahead and lift this up, yep, there's one of the springs, and over here we'll see the second side of the spring. So the indents that you have right here, that's actually where the slide itself rides up against, and I went ahead and ejected the spring number 2. We have the 2 springs that are going to be there. I'm going to move my pliers to the side. This is the cover plate itself, and then this is the lock the catch for the drawer itself. We're going to move that over to the side. And so now if you look inside, what you'll see is you now have access to the locking screw and the cam that actually comes with the ARB. So real simple. We're actually just going to go ahead and unscrew this bad boy. We're going to take this out, move it to the side because we don't need it, and then we're going to go ahead and take off the locking cam itself. That goes off to the side. So now if I go ahead and open this up, you can see, I don't know, it might be a little difficult in there to see, but what you have is the lock itself, but you also have a lockdown nut that actually holds it into place. And what I just found is the easiest thing to really use to get something in there, to at least get it started, is a pair of channel locks. And I'm just going to squeeze them in. I just need to really just get it started. And then once I get it started, I think I have it enough. Now while I'm holding the front edge of it, I'm going to go ahead and just see if I can spin it with my fingers. Just about there, and there we go. Yeah, this is going to help if you got skinnier fingers. If you got big old sausage fingers, this part might be a little more difficult. And there we go. So we'll go ahead and we'll push down on the lock itself, and it'll allow us to pop this guy out and drop out the locking key, or the locking ring. And just go ahead and gingerly massage and coax it out. So what we have is there's actually a directional plate that basically lets you set which direction the key locks from. So whether or not you you put it in and turn it to the left, or put it in and turn it to the right. You can actually key it and index the key location by actually switching this guy around. So this one just happened to be a little bit wider, and you can actually see that it's a little bit wider than what the index is on the lock itself, so it actually got stuck in there. So we actually worked past that. Now, if I couldn't get past that, then all I would do is I would stick a little screwdriver inside here and just knock this piece off. So we now have the two locks. We have the lock that came out of it, which is from ARB, and then we have the lock that we're going to put into it, which is actually from Medeco. Now, they're both designed about the same. So these both have the double D keyway that most locks use. Problem is, if you look at the ARB one is on the flats. It's 15.65 millimeters, and on the Medeco, 15.79. On the thread side of it, you have 8.47 millimeters, and then on the Medeco you have 18.69. So there's a little bit of a difference in there, and the issue is when I go to put the Medeco in, it doesn't quite want to go in. Now it's close, really, really close. But what we have to do now to get it so that it goes in snug the way we want to is we actually have to go in with a small little file and go ahead and open this up roughly about 0.5 millimeter all the way around. So here we have the handle, and we have the open keyway. We took out all the guts on it, and now we have to open up the keyway roughly 0.5 millimeter all the way around. Now you have two flats and then two semicircles, or roughly semicircles that are there. So what we have to do is we actually have to file that down. Now I have this file that I have. I couldn't tell you for the life of me where in the heck I got this file, but I have a whole bunch of them. If I can find them, I'll supply them. If I can't, well, kind of on your own, sorry. But on this one, what you'll notice is it's actually a semicircle. So it's actually flat on one side here, which takes care of my flats, and then it's rounded on this side here, which will take care of the semicircles onto the handle itself. And so all I'm going to do literally at this point is I'm just going to go ahead and just sand this thing down. Now this process will take a few minutes, and you're going to have a little bit of trial and error back and forth. So as I go ahead and I sand this thing or grate this thing down, every few minutes I'll come back and I'll test fit the Medeco lock. And once I can get the Medeco lock to fit in there snugly without being too tight, then I know I'm in a good spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you what I'm doing here. So I'm going to do the flat face, the second flat face, and then you have your semicircle side. So basically all I do is I'm going to flip around the file so I have the curved side, and so the curved side matches the curved side, and then I'm going to go to the fourth side here. And so with this, I'm not going to bore you with filming this entire process, but it's going to take a few minutes. Not that long, because you're basically just filing plastic, so it's not going to be super laborious. But it's going to be enough to where you're going to spend a couple minutes going back and forth until you find that sweet spot. Alright guys, I have about 5 minutes of filing, maybe a little bit less. And so now I finally have, there we go. And so as I go ahead and pop this guy in, you'll see that I now have everything where I want it to go. So we're looking pretty good here. Make sure he's set in all the way. And now you can see where it's nice and flat and flush all the way around. As I turn it, here's where our new locking cam position is going to be, and we're going to go ahead and undo this nut, put in the new locking cam, and then we're good to go. I don't need an extra tool for this. I'm just going to grab the socket. This is 7/16, and I'm just going to go ahead and unscrew the nut that's on the back of the lock itself. And there's also a lock washer that's in. Alright, so I went ahead and I took off the nut, and I took off the little lock washer. So here you can see the little lock washer, and here you can see the nut itself. This is the actual cam lock that we're going to be using. But what I did want to show you is, while you're doing this, if all of a sudden you take off the nut and lock washer and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, the tumbler just fell out, and I don't know where that goes. And you know, there's, you know, my directional cam, you know, that just fell out. You know, where does this thing go? Well, it's actually pretty simple. So on the Medeco lock itself, basically you've got the channel where the key goes, and then you have the little locks that they use to actually set the depth for the keys themselves. And so if you look inside the lock, there's actually two channels inside the tumbler itself. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to take, it doesn't make a difference which side that this thing goes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the little area here that has the only part that's raised, and I'm just going to go ahead and slide it into one of those. It actually doesn't matter which one it is, but I'm just going to slide it, I'm just going to push it back in. And I'm just going to go ahead and hold it with my thumb, and I'm going to take the, now this is going to be, I don't know what Medeco calls it, but for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to call it just a directional cam. And so by setting this will allow me to decide whether or not this thing turns to the left or turns to the right. So I'm just going to go ahead and just pick a direction just for the time being, and then we'll go ahead and test to see if it goes in a direction that I like. The directional cam on. What it does is, let me go and just hold that into place. When I put the key in, you can see it lets me turn this actually clockwise. Now if I turn the cam onto the other side, it would actually let me turn it counterclockwise. For me, just because it's just easier to realize which way it goes, I'm actually going to turn it so that's counterclockwise. And so that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it. Alright, so the next part is actually putting in the locking nut itself. The lock nut actually drives from the back side of it and locks the actual tumbler and cylinder in place. And so what you have here is you have one side that's a little more flat and one side that's kind of domed. The side that's actually flat is actually the piece that's actually going to go in first, so that the rounded part actually sits on the outside. So same thing, I'm going to actually keep my finger on the key, or if you don't have the key in there, keep your finger on the tumbler itself so that it doesn't actually fall out. And all I'm going to do is just going to guide this in with my fingers. And I'm just going to go, and the trick to this is I'm going to go ahead and just pop this up and down as I need to just let the lock nut go past it. Once that's done, then basically I'm just going to do a little bit of finger gymnastics here and go ahead and manually hand tighten the lock nut itself over the cylinder. And so this takes a little bit of finessing, but once you got it, then you're good to go after that. There we go. And we are good to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and drive the nut all the way down to the bottom there. Now I don't have a fancy schmancy tool that is going to let me tighten that in this little space that I have here. I'm sure Snap-on makes something. I ain't going to spend the money. So instead I'm just going to use my handy dandy little channel locks here, and I'm just going to go ahead and just get just a little bit of a tighten. I don't have to go nuts here. I basically just have to make sure that this thing isn't loose. So we're pretty tight. So give it a good shake. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. Now if that part is done, and I still have my finger on the key so that the cylinder doesn't pop out, and we're good to go on that part, now I can go ahead and I can take, this is actually the locking cam itself. This is the actual cam itself that goes back and forth, that actually locks and unlocks, and actually acts as the stop to prevent the handle itself from being opened. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop that into place. It's only keyed one way, so I'm only going to be able to put it in one way. The serrated lock washer, the nut itself, and then we don't have to go nuts with this, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to just take just the 7/16 socket, hold the key in place, and I'm just going to just hand tighten it. And so now what I have is a key that will allow me to lock the handle on my ARB drawer set. The basically second to last stage of this is actually putting the components back together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tab or locking guide or whatever this thing happens to be called, and I'm just going to start doing the reverse setup. So I'm going to put this into place. I'm going to move this all the way down to give me as much room as I can for the springs. Now with the springs, you may not get this the first time, and it might be a little bit frustrating, but just keep at it, and 2 or 3 more tries and you can probably get it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start on the first one. I'm going to get it into place. So what I do is I put it on the first spot, I give it a bend up, put it on the second spot, and then just push it down in the center, and it just kind of, you hear that little snap that goes into place. And I'm going to hold this guy. Then I'm going to go to the second one. I'm going to do the same exact thing, and I'm going to hear that little snap. Now I've got both sides in. From here, don't let go. You let go and these things are going to just spring all over. But I have this guy that's ready to go on. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to slowly, like I said, you got to do it more than once. So I'm going to come back, set this guy into place while holding the other spring. And these guys are a little bit greasy, just because of the friction that goes in there, but shouldn't be an issue. So, there's number 3. See, there's number 4. Let's see how many more times I got to do it. So if I move real quick, got it. So there, ready to go. Both springs are in there. And how do we know both springs are in? Because if I come back in here and unlock it, I should be able to open, and I can. I'm good. So I'm going to come in here, and while I'm holding pressure on this, because it does want to spring up on me, I'm going to go ahead and screw this guy into place. Once I get two of these in, then I'm not going to worry about the springs anymore, because there's enough tension on there to hold them in place. So let me go through number 3 and then number 4. And then after this step, we're just going to go ahead and put it back up on the drawers itself. Alright, so here is the completed unit with the new Medeco lock. And this is real simple. It just goes back into the little indentation in the carpet that was there. And I'm going to take the screws. So there's 1 screw, 1 washer. And I'm just going to guide it into the existing holes that are there. Alright, and here we go with number 4. Put this stuff back. And so now you can see I have 2 ARB drawers with Medeco locks. So locked, locked, and now we're good to go. Good and locked. So here's the other thing that I wanted to show. So right now, the way that these locks are set up, this particular lock is what's known as single pull. So there's double pull and there's single pull. Single pull just means when the item or the lock is locked, the key is allowed to pull out. Double pull means that it can pull out regardless if it's unlocked or locked. So I debated back and forth on which one that it should be. So on mine, they happens to be so that if you actually have them unlocked, you actually can't pull them out, and that's to remind you, or remind me, hey, you know, dummy, go ahead and take the key back out. And it lets me know that yes, these things are locked. Here's the problem. For those who tend to be forgetful, for those who have to separate their keys and whatnot, when this tailgate gets closed, the likelihood of the key snapping off inside of this is pretty high, especially for somebody that has to operate your drawers that isn't you, that doesn't realize how this thing goes. So what I'm actually going to be doing is actually making them so it's going to be a double pull, so you can pull them out either way. The way that this is also set up with ARB, once this drawer is open, if I go ahead and lock it, so it's locked. The good thing is once it's locked and I remove the key from it, if I go ahead and let it go, it still closes, it still locks. So I'm still good to go on that side. But for those who are going to be ordering, you will be getting the locks that are going to be double pull. Also realize these locks are going to be key to like. So both these locks get the same exact key. Now if you already have Medeco, if you already use Medeco for your work or for your home or what have you, and there's a key that you're already using that you want to have them keyed to, send me the key code and I'll actually key these locks to the exact same Medeco key that you have. If you already have some of my products, for the Wits End products that have the keys, such as the Wits End lockbox or the Wits End fire extinguisher mount locking lid, or some of the other products that I have coming up that use Medeco, all I need to know is that you've purchased some of our products before, you already have a Medeco key, and can I have a key to like? Well, I have a register of all the keys that have been sold through Wits End, so as long as I know who you are, then I can go ahead and have these keys, these locks and keys made up exactly identical to the keys you guys are already using. So just let me know ahead of time when you're ordering, and it's just an extra couple hours to have them key to like. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please go to the site, email me, text me, whatever you need to do, but let me know what you think. Thanks.